There are moments in a man's life that don't announce themselves. They don't come with a warning or a sign on the door. They come quietly, the way a season changes. You wake up one morning and the air is different, and you realize something ended while you weren't looking. For me, that moment came on a Wednesday afternoon in November, sitting in a corner booth at a diner I'd eaten at 100 times, watching my son set an envelope on the table between us like he was closing a business deal. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service, walking routes in rain, heat, and snow that would make most men quit by lunchtime. I have 2 bad knees, a pension that barely covers the rent on my apartment in Dayton, Ohio, and a son named Caleb who, somewhere between his freshman year of college and his 31st birthday, decided I was a liability. This is the story of the day he tried to pay me to disappear. Let me go back to the beginning, because if I don't, you'll think I'm leaving something out. You'll think a son doesn't do what Caleb did without a reason. And maybe you're right. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe the reason was that I drove a 10-year-old Buick and wore New Balance sneakers I bought on clearance and talked too loud at restaurants because I spent 30 years outdoors and never quite adjusted to indoor volume. Maybe the reason was that I said ain't sometimes and mispronounced words I'd only ever read in books and never heard spoken aloud. Maybe those were reasons enough. Caleb's mother, Diane, passed when he was 9 years old. Breast cancer, caught too late, gone within 18 months of the diagnosis. Passed. I sat with her every night in that hospital room until she couldn't recognize me anymore, and then I sat with her anyway. When she died, I went home, told Caleb his mama wasn't coming back, held him while he cried until neither of us had anything left, and then I got up the next morning and put on my uniform and walked my route because that was the only thing I knew how to do. I raised him by myself after that. Just the 2 of us in a 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood where people knew each other's names and kids still played outside until the streetlights came on. I coached his little league team even though I knew nothing about baseball. I drove him to chess club on Tuesday nights and sat in the parking lot for 2 hours reading paperback westerns because I didn't want him to think I was rushing him. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every award ceremony, always in the second row because I was never the kind of man who needed to be in the front. When Caleb got a full scholarship to Ohio State, I cried in the shower so he wouldn't see me. I didn't tell him what that scholarship meant to me, what it meant for the emergency fund I'd never had to touch, for the retirement I still wasn't sure I'd be able to afford. I just told him I was proud of him, which was the truest thing I've ever said. College changed him. Of course it did. That's what it's supposed to do. He studied finance, graduated near the top of his class, got recruited by a consulting firm in Columbus that paid him more in his first year than I'd made in my last 5 combined. I told everyone at my route about it. I told Mrs. Patterson and old Mr. Diaz and the folks at the insurance office on Elmwood. I bragged like it was something I had personally accomplished, which I suppose in some small way I had. I noticed things shifting around his 3rd year out of school. The way he'd correct me on the phone when I used the wrong term for something. The way he'd go quiet when I mentioned work, as if the word root embarrassed him. The way he started talking about his colleagues and his clients and his professional circle like these were the people who defined him now, like the 2 of us eating SpaghettiOs out of the can on Friday nights and watching boxing reruns was a chapter he'd already edited out of the book of himself. Then he met Nicole. Nicole came from what Caleb called a connected family, which I came to understand meant money, influence, and a very particular set of expectations about who belonged in their world and who didn't. Her father was a state senator. Her mother chaired the boards of more charitable organizations than I could keep track of. They had a lake house in Michigan and a winter place in Scottsdale and a last name that opened doors I didn't even know existed. Nicole herself was polished in the way that people are polished when they've been polished their whole lives, not unkind, exactly, but careful. Careful with her words. Careful with her associations. Careful, I would come to learn, with her image. They got engaged at a rooftop restaurant in Columbus. Caleb sent me a photo of the ring, which I later looked up online and found cost roughly what I made in a year and a half. I called him to congratulate him. He sounded happy, genuinely happy, and for a moment I let myself believe that everything was going to be fine. The engagement lasted 11 months. In that time, I met Nicole 4 times. Once for dinner at a place where I ordered something I couldn't pronounce and ate it without knowing what it was. Once at a birthday party for her mother where I stood near the cheese table for an hour because it was the only place I felt I had a reason to stand. Once when I drove up to Columbus to drop off a box of Caleb's old things he'd asked for, and Nicole answered the door in a silk robe and looked at me the way people look at a package they didn't order. And once, the worst time, at a dinner party at their apartment where Caleb introduced me to his colleagues and I watched his face tighten every time I opened my mouth. I drove home from that dinner party in the dark with the radio off, doing the math I'd been avoiding for months, adding up the silences, the redirected conversations, and the way Caleb had started calling less and texting more, and the texts had gotten shorter, more transactional. The way, "I love you, Dad," had slowly been replaced with, "talk soon," and then just a thumbs-up emoji. The wedding date was set for the second Saturday in March. I wasn't involved in the planning. I understood that. And well, I understood that. These things are complicated, and I'm not the kind of man who needs to be consulted about centerpieces. But I kept waiting for something, some small gesture, some question that would make me feel like I was part of it. I kept waiting for Caleb to call and say, "Hey, Dad, what do you think about this?" Anything, even just, "Dad, what color tie should I wear?" That call never came. Instead, I got a text on a Monday morning. "Hey, Dad, can we meet up this week? Need to talk through some stuff. Wednesday work." I read it 3 times. The word stuff, not exciting news, not wedding update, just stuff. And the formality of it, like I was an appointment on a calendar, like I was something to be managed. I knew, somewhere in the part of me that has spent 63 years learning to read a room. I already knew. I got to the diner 40 minutes early, ordered black coffee, sat in the corner booth where Caleb and I used to eat after his Little League games, back when this place had a different name and the pie was better and life was simpler in the ways that only become clear in retrospect. I watched a young couple share a plate of fries by the window. End quote. I watched a grandmother cut a little girl's pancakes into pieces. I thought about Diane and what she would have said about all of this, and I decided she probably would have known what to say in a way that I never could. Caleb came in at 12 on the dot. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit, no tie, the kind of casual expensive that takes effort to look effortless. He looked like someone who had never eaten a SpaghettiO in his life. He sat across from me without hugging me, which he used to always do, and he placed an envelope on the table between us before he'd even taken off his coat. "Dad," he said, "I need you to hear me out before you say anything." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup and nodded. He took a breath, looked at the envelope, then at me, then back at the envelope. Nicole's family has certain expectations about the wedding. It's going to be a big event. Senator Hargrove will be there. Members of the firm. People who are important to our future, to our careers, to the life we're building. He paused. And I need it to go perfectly. I didn't say anything. I let him find his way to it. "Dad," he said, and now his voice dropped, got quieter, got that particular softness that people use when they're trying to make something cruel sound like kindness. "You don't really fit in with that crowd. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean that you're you. You're a postal worker. You drive a Buick. You talk about the weather and your route and the Browns. And that's great, that's who you are, and I love you for it. But at this wedding, in that room, it's going to be senators and partners, and I just can't have people wondering. I can't have Nicole's mother making comments. I can't have the optics of—" He stopped himself. He pushed the envelope toward me. "There's $15,000 in there. It's mine, my money, not Nicole's. I want you to take a trip. You've always talked about going to see the national parks out west. You said you wanted to see the Grand Canyon before your knees got worse. So go. Go for 2 weeks. Go see something beautiful and let me have this one day without worrying about how it all looks." I stared at that envelope for a long time. I thought about 31 years of walking. 31 years of carrying other people's mail through every kind of weather this country knows how to produce. I thought about the Christmas he was 7 years old, and I worked overtime for 3 straight weeks so he could have the bicycle he wanted. The one I'd hidden in Mrs. Patterson's garage. I thought about the Tuesday nights in the parking lot of the chess club. I thought about sitting alone in a hospital room holding Diane's hand and thinking, I can do this alone, I can raise him alone, I can be enough. I thought about all of that, and then I picked up the envelope, put it in my jacket pocket, and said, "All right, Caleb." He blinked. "All right? All right," I said again. "If that's what you need." Something passed over his face. Relief, mostly. A little guilt, maybe, though not as much as I would have liked. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand once, quickly, the way you pat a dog on the head on your way out the door. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd do the right thing." He left 12 minutes later. I sat there until my coffee went cold. Then I put on my coat, walked out to my Buick, and sat in the parking lot for a while listening to the engine tick. I didn't go home. I just drove. No destination, no radio, no podcast, just the roads I've known for 30 years and the quiet of a man trying to locate himself inside a grief he doesn't have a name for yet. $15,000. That's what my son thought I was worth. That's what he believed it would cost to keep me out of the frame. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I didn't make any decisions. I went to work. I walked my routes. I came home and made dinner and watched the news without hearing it. I took long showers. I slept badly. I was a man going through the motions of living while trying to figure out whether living still made sense in the shape it had taken. 9 days before the wedding, my phone rang at 10:30 in the evening. I didn't recognize the number. It was a Columbus area code, but not one I knew. Something told me to answer it anyway. Call it 30 years of walking routes you learn to pay attention to what's out of place. "Mr. Lester?" The voice was young, female, shaky in a way that sounded like someone who'd been crying recently and was trying to sound like they hadn't. "Number 2. "Yes," I said. "This is Nicole." A pause. "Caleb's Nicole." I sat up slowly in my recliner. My heart did something complicated in my chest. "Is everything all right? Is Caleb?" "He's fine," she said quickly. "He's fine physically. I needed to talk to someone, and I didn't know who to call, and the only person I kept thinking about was you." End quote. I didn't say anything. I waited. "Can I come over?" she asked. "I know it's late. I know this is strange. I'm already in Dayton. I drove here and now I'm sitting in my car in a gas station parking lot on 5th Street because I didn't know if I should come or just go back home. And I've been sitting here for 45 minutes trying to decide." I said, "I'll leave the porch light on." She arrived 20 minutes later. I watched from my window as she pulled up in a silver sedan that probably cost more than my apartment. She sat in the car for a while, just like Jeremy had done in the original story, just like anyone does when they're about to walk into something they can't walk back from. Then she got out. She was not the Nicole I'd seen at dinner parties and holiday photos. She was wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, and she had no makeup on, and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look younger and more human than I'd ever seen her. When she got to my door and I opened it, she looked at me with eyes that were red around the edges and said, "I'm so sorry to bother you." "You're not bothering me," I said. "Come in." I made her tea because that's what I knew how to do. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table Caleb and I used to do homework at, the same table where I helped him with college applications, and she wrapped both hands around the mug and stared down into it like there was something at the bottom she was trying to read. "I found something," she said finally. 2 days ago, I was going through some receipts for the wedding, just accounting stuff, and I found the cashier's check stub, $15,000. Made out to you, with a memo line that said, "Do not attend." She looked up at me. I asked Caleb about it. He lied at first. He said it was a gift, said you needed help with some bills. But I kept asking, and he finally told me. She set the mug down. "But he told me he paid you not to come to the wedding because he was afraid of how you'd look to my family. Because of your job, your car, your—" She stopped, pressed her fingers to her mouth. Your. I didn't move. "Mr. Lester," she said, and now her voice was breaking in the way voices do when the feeling gets too big to hold steady. "My father is a state senator. My mother has been on more boards and committees than I can count. I grew up in a house where success was the only currency and everything else was just noise. And I have spent my entire adult life trying to escape that, trying to be a person who sees people as people." She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. "And I fell in love with Caleb because I thought he was different. Because when he talked about you in the beginning, before he got deep enough into the job and the social climbing to lose himself, when he talked about you, his face lit up. He told me about the Little League. He told me about the Tuesday nights. He told me about your wife. She paused. About his mom. About how you held it together for him after she died. And, quote, I had to look at the window for a moment, just to get myself level. What he did to you is wrong, she said. It is profoundly wrong. And I don't know who he has become, but the man I thought I was marrying would never have done this. The man I fell in love with would have been ashamed to have even thought it. She looked at me with steadiness I hadn't expected from someone who'd been crying in a gas station parking lot an hour ago. I called off the engagement tonight. I looked at her directly. Nicole, I know, she said. I know it's drastic. I know people will say I'm being extreme. But I keep thinking if he can look at you, the man who raised him alone, who walked routes in Ohio winters so he could go to chess club and baseball in college, if he can look at you and see something to be embarrassed by, then I don't know who he is. And I don't know who he'll decide I am someday when I don't fit the image he needs me to fit. I know. She picked up the mug again. Her hands were steadier now. My parents aren't going to understand, she said quietly. My mother is going to lose her mind. My father is going to make that face he makes when something fails to meet expectations. She almost smiled. Just barely. But I keep thinking about my grandfather. He was a plumber. 40 years, other people's pipes. Died with grease in the lines of his palms, and the most dignity of anyone I've ever known. My mother spent 20 years trying to make me forget about him. And I'm not going to be the kind of woman who makes someone forget about their father. We talked for 3 hours. Not about Caleb, not about the wedding, about Dayton, about the route, about Diane, how she used to leave notes in Caleb's lunchbox, and how after she was gone I tried to keep doing it for a year because I didn't know what else to do. Nicole told me about her grandfather, the plumber, and how he used to call her nickel and slip quarters into her coat pocket every time he hugged her. She cried twice. I cried once, though I'd deny it to anyone who asked. When she stood up to leave, she looked around my kitchen the way people look at a place they want to remember. Thank you for letting me in, she said. Thank you for driving down here, I said. Thank you for caring enough to find out the truth. She nodded. At the door, she turned back. What are you going to do? With the money? I thought about it for a second. Pay off my car, I said. And maybe see about getting these knees looked at properly. She smiled. A real one this time. Good, she said. You should. The next week was a storm. Caleb called 19 times. I let the first 6 go to voicemail. In the first message, he was angry, telling me I had no right to interfere in his life. In the 4th, he was confused, not fully understanding what Nicole had told me or how much. In the 8th, he was crying, asking me to call him back, saying he was sorry. In the 11th, he said he didn't know what had happened to him, that he hadn't recognized himself for a long time. I listened to every one of them. I didn't call back right away because I had nothing yet to say that wouldn't come out wrong. I'm a man who needs to let things settle before I open my mouth. Diane used to say I process slowly, but I process clean, and that it was worth the wait. I called him back on a Thursday, 10 days later. He answered on the first ring. The conversation was long and hard and not particularly elegant. We're not a family that has ever been good with words, Caleb and I. We show up. We do things. We're not built for the kind of conversations that require a lot of vocabulary. But we got through it. He said he was ashamed. He said he'd gotten so deep into the version of himself that the job and the social world required that he'd forgotten who he was underneath it. He said that when he looked at me, he'd stopped seeing his father and started seeing a reflection of a past he was running from, and he hated himself for it. I told him the truth. I told him I didn't know if I could forgive him right away. I told him that what he'd done had changed something between us, and I wasn't sure yet what shape it would take when things settled. But I also told him that I was his father, and that being his father didn't come with an off switch, and that I had loved him through every stupid decision he'd ever made in his life, and I wasn't going to stop now. What about Nicole? He asked. That's between you and Nicole, I said. You did something that hurt her too. That's going to take a different kind of work. End quote. It took 7 months. 7 months of Caleb driving down to Dayton to sit on my couch and talk, not about the wedding or the money or what had gone wrong, but about real things, about his mother, about the route, about who he wanted to be when the resume didn't define him. 7 months of him and Nicole working through something painful and complicated that I wasn't privy to and wasn't meant to be. Nicole called me once during that time, just to tell me she was okay, and that she appreciated the night I'd made her tea and let her sit at my kitchen table. I told her she was welcome back anytime, with or without my son. She laughed a little at that. They got back together in the fall. They got married the following spring in a backyard. Not a senator's lawn, not a country club. End quote. Nicole's aunt had a property out in Granville with an old barn that let the light in sideways in the afternoon, and that's where they did it. 60 people, folding chairs, a catered barbecue from a place in Columbus that Nicole said was Caleb's choice, not hers, and that it was the first time he'd made a decision purely because he liked something rather than because it would impress someone. I wore a sport coat I'd had for 15 years that still fit because I've been roughly the same size since 1998. Nobody mentioned my shoes. Caleb walked out to meet me before the ceremony started. We stood near the edge of the property where there was an old fence line and a field of dry November grass past it. He put his arm around my shoulder and we stood there for a minute without saying anything. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "Not for today, for before." "I know," I said. "I'm going to spend a long time making that right." "You already started," I said. He walked me into the ceremony himself, didn't ask anyone else, and now just took me by the arm and walked me to the front row like I was the most important person there, which I suppose, being his father, I was. Nicole walked herself down the aisle. She decided she wanted to do it that way, and when she got to the front and reached for Caleb's hand, she caught my eye first and gave me a nod that said everything words couldn't. The ceremony was short. The vows were the kind people write themselves when they've decided that the things they almost lost matter more than the things they thought they wanted. The food was good. The light in that barn in the late afternoon was something I won't forget. Toward the end of the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and the string lights had settled into their quiet, Caleb found me sitting outside on a hay bale, drinking a beer, watching the stars come out over the Ohio fields. He sat down next to me. We didn't say anything for a while. "You know I used the money," I said eventually. "I know," he said. "Nicole told me. Got my knees scoped. Both of them. Should have done it years ago." I took a sip of beer. "Whatever's left I'm putting toward a trip. Thinking, maybe Yellowstone. Maybe the Tetons. Always wanted to see that part of the country." Caleb nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to go with you. If you'd let me." I looked at him. He was looking at the stars, not at me, which was the way Caleb had always said the harder things, sideways, into the middle distance where it was a little easier to be honest. "You'd take a week off to drive through Wyoming with your old man?" I said. "I'd take 2, he said, "if you'd have me." I didn't say anything right away. I let the field breathe. Let the stars come out a little more. Let the moment be what it was, which was not a resolution exactly, but a direction. A facing toward something rather than away from it. "I'll drive," I said. He laughed. And it sounded like him, the real him, the one I'd been waiting to hear again for 4 years. It sounded like a kid who got picked up from chess club on Tuesday nights and stayed awake on the drive home talking about nothing in particular. "Deal," he said. We sat out there until Nicole came to find us, standing in the doorway of the barn with her shoes off and her hair down and her grandfather's name working itself into the way she carried herself, visible to anyone who knew to look for it. "You two done being sentimental?" she called out. "Not quite," I called back. She shook her head and went back inside. Caleb and I sat another few minutes before following her. I drove home that night on roads I've known my whole life, windows down, country quiet on both sides, feeling something I hadn't felt in longer than I could honestly remember, not happiness exactly. Something more durable than that. Something closer to knowing that you are where you belong and that the people who matter know where to find you. The check stub is still in my kitchen drawer. I kept it, not the money that's gone where it should have gone, into my knees and my future, but the stub. The carbon copy of what my son thought I was worth on the worst day he ever had. Some nights I take it out and look at it. I don't do it because I'm angry. I'm past angry. I do it because I need to remember how close we came. How close a man can get to losing the one thing that no job title, no country club, no senator's handshake can replace or replicate or pay $15,000 to substitute. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old. I walk with a slight hitch now that the surgeon says is just my body learning its new normal. I drive a Buick that's 11 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, that used to feel too big and has recently started feeling just right again. My son is coming next month. We're going to drive to Wyoming together. 2 weeks. No itinerary. No agenda. No one to impress. 8. I have been thinking about what I want you to take from this story, those of you who've been walking alongside me through it. A son's love or a daughter's, or a parent's, or anyone's is not something you earn by becoming the right version of yourself for the right room. You don't earn it by driving the right car or wearing the right shoes or knowing which fork to use. You earn it by showing up. By being present in the hard moments and the boring moments and the Tuesday nights in the parking lot, by staying when staying is the only thing you have left to offer. And if someone ever tries to tell you that your presence, your real, honest, imperfect presence, can be replaced by a check, let them be wrong. Let them find out the hard way what it costs to discover they were wrong. Because they will find out. And, 1, they always do. I'm living proof.